Hello there, everybody. This is Alan Feldman.
And I'm Heather Bennett with the Laguna Woods Democratic Club, and we're here today with Katie Porter, the congressional candidate for the 45th District. And Katie, thank you for coming in today and talking with us. If you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
Absolutely. So I'm a UC Irvine law professor. I specialize in consumer protection, and I've spent my career working to help families who were cheated by big banks or predatory lenders. I have 3 great kids who go to Irvine Public School, and I was so proud to come here and move into the 45th District when they founded the law school at UC Irvine several years ago, and it's been wonderful to watch it grow and get to know the 45th District. So I'm excited about taking on Republican Mimi Walters in November.
We're going to start right with the most important thing for our audience is primarily Laguna Woods. And there's really nothing more important. I'm going to group them together to people in Laguna Woods, Social Security and Medicare, which are constantly under attack since their founding. So if we could start right there. What do you think we need to do to preserve Social Security and to enhance Social Security and Medicare? You can break them up or put them together as you wish.
Absolutely. I think we have to talk about expanding Social Security. We need to change the narrative. We need to make sure that voters understand that Social Security doesn't add a single penny to our deficit. And in fact, what's happening is the government is not doing its job of being fiscally responsible and then putting Social Security, which is a solid fiscal program that pays for itself, at risk. And we've seen that with Mimi Walters' vote for the Trump tax plan, which is going to lead to, if we don't reverse it by electing new people to Congress in November, could lead to drastic cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Social Security is relied on for income by 1 in 6 Americans. And of course, seniors are a big part of that, but it's also children who have lost a parent. It's those who have become disabled. It's a vital lifeline for our older Americans, and it's our promise to each other that as we age or as we have disabilities or we lose a parent, that we'll be here as a safety net for us.
And how about Medicare? What's your opinion of how solvent it is and what we need to do to make it better and expand it? People are talking about expanding Medicare.
Absolutely. I think Medicare is a great example of healthcare that works, but we can make it work better. And one of the first things I would want to do is make sure that we allow our government, in its role as purchaser of pharmaceuticals, to be able to negotiate drug prices. This is a capitalist country. We ought to be able to come to the table as the government, as Medicare, and negotiate with drug prices. We don't do that right now because of a law passed by those in Congress who are beholden to powerful special interests like the big pharmaceutical companies. That's why our campaign doesn't take corporate PAC money. We don't take money from big pharma, because when I go to Congress, I'll stand up to them to make sure that we reduce the price of prescription drugs, which is one of the biggest pressures on Medicare solvency right now.
People, just one thing on that point, people might have seen a couple of weeks ago, there was a big advertisement in the Los Angeles Times. Mimi Walters won an award for preserving Medicare, from some organization preserving Medicare. But if you look at that organization, they're only interested in preserving one portion of Medicare. That's a drug company organization, and the Medicare they want to preserve is the inability of the government to negotiate drug prices.
Absolutely. It was an award for really being beholden to special interests rather than serving her constituents here in the 45th District. So doing something about our drug prices, which are the highest in the world, is one of the ways that we're going to be able to strengthen Medicare and then expand it to all Americans.
Right. As I said, nothing is more important than Social Security and Medicare to the people here. It's the primary, if not only, source of income, and primary, if not only, medical coverage to so many people here in Laguna Woods.
I mean, absolutely. 2 in 3 American seniors rely on Social Security for the majority of their income. And if we didn't have Social Security, our poverty rate among our older Americans would be 45%. With Medicare in place, it's 10%. And that's what we're talking about, making sure that those who have worked hard their whole lives can retire with dignity and enjoy their retirement and know that the American people have their back and will stand with them, and that we'll stand with generations to come to preserve and expand Social Security.
So what's the thought on the Medicare for all or the single payer, or, I mean, what's your feeling about that?
Yeah, healthcare is one of the top issues in the country right now, and it's affecting every single person in the 45th district. We all, at some point or the other, will need healthcare, whether it's an emergency or whether it's routine care. And let's face it, the status quo in healthcare is broken. For those people who are not on Medicare or were recently in the workforce, you remember getting those letters. They're going to come out right around the time of Election Day that say 2019 benefits update. When we open those envelopes, we know what we're going to see. We're going to be asked to see fewer providers with higher out-of-pocket maximums, higher co-pays, higher deductibles, and fewer choices of doctors. And so Americans cannot continue on this path. It's time to talk about what we can do to improve the healthcare system. And that's going to take willingness to have a hard conversation about the role of health insurance companies and the role of pharmaceutical companies in delivering healthcare. I firmly believe, and I'm sitting here today, 2 weeks ago my appendix burst, and I wound up at Hoag Hospital. I was so grateful to be able to choose my own hospital and to choose my own doctor. But that's an option that we can give people through Medicare for All. Right now, with the insurance companies that we have making fewer and fewer and fewer providers available to people, it's really a limiting factor. And so my own health insurance, I'm a UC Irvine professor. I'm thrilled to work there. I know I have good health insurance. And my family's out-of-pocket maximum is $19,200. And that's too high. And we're seeing some of the same problems as we've let pharmaceutical companies hijack Medicare, with Medicare D premiums becoming unaffordable for seniors.
I'd like to move to something that you actually brought together at the beginning, which I think is important, and that is taxes. And I want to talk about taxes because we have this mammoth high-income earner corporate tax cut that was passed by Congress. And it was sold to us, as it always is, not going to cost us anything, it's going to create jobs, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. But I think it was the day after the tax bill was passed, the Speaker of the House, soon to be former Speaker of the House, was having a press conference saying, now that we passed this big tax bill, we can no longer afford Social Security and Medicare as they are. So let's move to that subject of taxes. And what do you think about this tax bill that was passed? Does it hurt or does it help the people here?
I think it was a tax scam. And I think we have to be clear about it. The American people were straight up lied to. They were told that this tax bill would put money back in their pocket, and it didn't. It was a giveaway to large corporations, and what have those large corporations done? They've lined their executives' own pockets with CEO pay at an all-time high. And so we need to reverse that tax bill. It's also fiscally irresponsible. It blows up the deficit, which is going to put programs like Social Security at risk and also put more pressure onto the next generation, which is a generation of folks who are struggling with high child care costs, student loans, and other things. So that tax bill does not put money back in people's pockets, and that's so true here in the 45th district, because that bill really punishes Californians. It's why no Orange County Republican, except Mimi Walters, voted for that tax bill. She's the only one who turned her back on California families. It's going to cap our state and local tax deduction, our mortgage interest deduction. It's going to make our housing affordability crisis at a time when that's one of the biggest challenges facing Orange County and trying to recruit new companies here is our high cost of living.
That's one of the things I think that's confusing to people as to whether or not the tax cut actually benefits them as regular people. We know it benefits high-income earners. We know it benefits corporations and businesses. But it's not putting money in people's pockets.
It's not. And in fact, when you talk to people around the district, what they've heard is they've gone to see their accountants to get ready for the next year's taxes, and they're being told, you're going to get hit with a big tax bill. Start saving now. My own employer sent out a letter to all of us at UC Irvine warning us that because of the tax bill, we probably weren't withholding enough taxes and to expect sticker shock come April 2019. And the only way that we as a community can protect ourselves from that sticker shock is to vote out Mimi Walters and elect a congresswoman like me who will fight for a fair tax code where big corporations pay their fair share.
Totally agreed.
Yeah.
What about, I know we live in a retirement community, but what about education, early childhood education, and college tuition. I mean, I know it's a state thing, but it's also a national issue.
Absolutely. What we're seeing is families are getting squeezed on both ends. They're struggling to pay off student loans, which are often stretching into their 40s and 50s and beyond, at the same time that they're struggling to pay for childcare. When I think about it, there are these moments in American life that used to be celebrations. When you walked across the stage to get your college diploma, when you learned that you were expecting your first or second child. And for a lot of families in the 45th district now, those are moments of real economic anxiety. They walk across the stage and they're thinking, how can I pay for this degree? Will I be able to get a job that will let me pay off 6 figures or more of college tuition? When people have children, often with the second child means that one of the parents can't afford to stay in the workplace and keep their skill set up because the childcare is so expensive. And I'll just speak from personal experience here. My daughter, Betsy, is now 6. When she was 4 years old, she went to UC Irvine's daycare. It's right on campus. Her tuition was more for the year as a 4-year-old than it would have been for her to be an undergraduate at UC Irvine. And that's a crisis that's not just about the generation that has little kids, it's also affecting our seniors who are often being asked by their kids to care for grandchildren, which is a joy, but often care for grandchildren longer and longer and into their senior years and then because the parents simply can't afford quality childcare. And the biggest thing that we can do to unleash our economy is to make sure that working parents can stay in the workforce, mom and dad. And that means making sure that we're making investments in early childhood education.
There's a topic, I guess, that they've unfortunately become connected that I'd like you to talk about. That is children in school and gun violence.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, with the school shootings and so forth, the mass shootings that we've seen, there's a big problem here. What do you think we should do about the problem? What's your position on this? What do you think needs to be done?
Gun violence is one of those issues where we know what the solutions are. We've seen them enacted in states like Massachusetts and to some degree California. We know that things like universal background checks that work, that expanded mental health treatment, that a ban on assault weapons and high capacity magazine clips, these are all tools that will reduce gun deaths. Not just mass shootings, which are tragedies, but also death by suicide by gun, child accidents by gun. These are things that really matter. Something that I'm passionate about is emergency orders for those who are having a crisis and being able to get a short-term order to take away the gun from somebody who, for instance, is in mental health crisis or in a very toxic domestic violence situation. That's a good way to reduce gun deaths, and we know what works. And we know it. The Giffords campaign, the Brady campaign, the Parkland kids, they have proposals. What's missing in our Congress is the courage to pass those laws. And that's what we need to do on day one of Congress, is introduce a package of comprehensive gun safety regulation and gun violence prevention, and it will save lives. And there are lives at stake right here in Orange County if we don't do that.
Yeah, when you call Mimi Walters' office and ask about gun violence, what's her position on gun violence, she does not talk about guns. She talks about mental health, which, you can make the connection. I think it's not a bad connection to make, but she talks about there's not enough mental health facilities and people need mental health services, and if we did that, we'd be able to alleviate a problem. But there was a rule that said that anybody who was declared mentally disabled by the Social Security Administration, which basically means you have to be unable to care for yourself or a danger to yourself and people of the community, if you were considered mentally disabled by Social Security, your name went on a list that said you're not allowed to buy guns. Mimi Walters voted to revoke that rule.
I know, it's
Total
terrible. It's
hypocrisy
putting
to
us
me.
all at risk. It's really putting our lives at risk. And we've seen the same thing with Mimi Walters' co-sponsorship of the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, which is a law that she supported that allows those who can purchase guns in states like Nevada or Louisiana that don't have the kinds of background checks that we have here in California. Those folks can now legally bring their weapons into California when they come here on vacation or to visit families. So it's also overriding our state laws that we've enacted as citizens of California that talk about the kinds of gun safety prevention we want to have.
I agree with you completely on that. It's there's a big difference between somebody needing to have a gun living in rural Idaho and somebody having a gun gives them the right to pack a gun in South Central Los Angeles.
Well, and the issue isn't gun ownership. The issue is what do we do to keep guns safe, right? And we know what works. And listen, it's no mystery why Mimi Walters fails to support gun violence prevention. She has an A+ rating from the NRA, and she's taken thousands of dollars from them. This is another vote, just like we talked about with Big Pharma, where Mimi Walters is being bought and paid for by special interests. And who's at risk? The families of the 45th District, all of us.
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's very true. I want to ask you also about, obviously here in California, the environment is a huge issue with people. We really celebrate in California the natural open areas that we have, and we really use them too, more than any place else. So what can we do to preserve them, and what can we do to prevent people from taking them away from us, and from offshore drilling and things like that? Where should we go? Where should we go from here to protect the environment?
Absolutely. Let me tell you where we should not go, which is backwards. And that's what we're seeing under this administration. With Donald Trump, we're seeing us moving backwards on fuel efficiency, backwards on clean water standards, backwards on combating climate change, backwards on protecting endangered species, backwards on protecting our public lands. So these were laws, the ones I just named, that were supported by both Republicans and Democrats in the 70s and 80s and 90s because they're good for America's long-term future. And so many people remember the air quality in Los Angeles in 1980s. We should not be going back to that kind of environment. It's not healthy. It'll cause asthma. It'll put people's lives at risk with lung safety. So we just need to go forward, keep making the investments in clean energy, believe that climate change is real, and absolutely no to offshore drilling off our beaches. Mimi Walters signed a letter to Secretary of the Interior Zinke urging him to open up Orange County beaches to offshore drilling. That's not only terrible for our environment, it's also terrible for our economy. One of the reasons we all love living here, and that companies want to come here, and that tourists want to come to Orange County, is that we have an absolutely beautiful coastline. And so we need to preserve that both for our environmental future, but also for our economic future.
Right. Well, and it's old technology. I mean, it's just not necessary.
Yeah, it is outdated technology, and what we're seeing is that clean energy is also creating jobs here in California. So right now in the 45th District, there are over 2,300 clean energy jobs. It's one of the sources of job growth that we can look to in the future, and we're perfectly situated to do it. We're in a place that values the environment, and we have a top-tier science research university in UCI that's going to help develop the clean energy technology of the future.
Good paying jobs.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah. How do you think we should expand? Can we expand the clean energy industry here? I mean, you go drive through the desert, and you see these immense wind farms, out here, and what can we do to move those along and to get people to realize these are legitimate sources of energy?
Yeah. So one of the things we have to do is make sure that those working in our Environmental Protection Agency, the scientists who really understand how to do this and how to create sustainable, long-term clean energy, are protected from the political whims of Donald Trump and Twitter. These are long-term projects creating the energy sources of the future, and so we need to make sure that we have an EPA leader, a secretary of the EPA that actually believes in climate change, who actually will stand up to big oil, and who will fight to protect the scientists who are already delivering the clean energy solutions of tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tough to have a credible environmental policy when the leader of your country doesn't realize that rivers flow to the oceans. He thinks they were diverted to the oceans.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do with that?
No, my children were actually laughing about that when Trump said that California is diverting water to the Pacific Ocean. We all know that when rain falls in the mountains, it flows downstream to the oceans. That is nature, and the idea that Donald Trump can reinvent nature by tweet is just false. And what we need in our district is someone in Congress who will speak up. When he's saying things like this that put Californians' economy at risk, that put our environment at risk, we need a voice for us. And we're just not seeing that out of Mimi Walters. She's been a rubber stamp for Trump's agenda, and in some cases has really aided and abetted his agenda.
I'd like to ask you, if I may, a little bit about the president, because as we're recording this will be shown after we recorded it. Just yesterday, the president's personal attorney pled guilty and implicated the president in campaign finance violations. And his campaign manager was convicted of 8 counts of tax fraud and bank fraud and so forth. So the situation maybe has changed a little bit from what it was yesterday. So just basically, what are your comments on this particular situation? And you go wherever you want without it.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I think about it. Our core institutions, really the pillars of our democracy, are under attack right now. And what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about things like the independence of the judiciary, which we've seen Donald Trump make personal attacks on federal judges, who we need for our democracy to work to be free from political influence. We've seen attacks on the Department of Justice, which is supposed to deliver, under Trump's mindset, whatever he wants, not justice. And so I think we need to absolutely protect the special prosecutor. We need to allow Mueller to continue his investigation. And as it seems has in fact happened, if Trump's allies and cronies have broken the law, we have to hold them to account. This administration has seen a record number of corruption scandals. It's unlike anything we've seen in recent history, in my memory. And what we've heard from Mimi Walters in response when asked about this is she doesn't see any real difference between Trump's administration, which has multiple people under indictment and have pled guilty, and past administrations. Americans want their government to work. They want their government to be powered by clean energy, so to speak, by folks who are going to follow the law. And that's not what we're seeing out of Washington. And it's going to be the House of Representatives' job in January 2019 to clean up the corruption that we've seen out of the Trump administration. And I can't wait to be part of that.
How do you think that will occur? I mean, people are now bandying about the impeachment word with more seriousness than they were before. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, obviously it's a possibility, but how do you see that? What steps should we take to drain the swamp?
I think we have to make sure that we're letting the special prosecutor do his job, find what's there, and tell the American people the truth. We need to make sure that all Americans, regardless of who they voted for or who they're going to vote for in the upcoming election, have confidence in our American democracy. When we go to the ballot box, we need to know that our vote counts. We need to protect our election system from hacking and fraud. We've seen the Republicans in Congress refuse to fund election security protections. And so it's really, when I'm talking about the core pillars of democracy, I'm talking about things like trusting judges to actually judge, trusting that votes cast actually count, trusting that our members of Congress will actually vote in the best interests of their constituents. This is the level of attack that our democracy is under, and this is time for every American who's a patriot to stand up and demand change in Washington.
It is. I think it's going to have to come from both sides. I don't think it. We saw what happened when President Clinton was impeached. It was obviously just a political ploy, and that's the way it ended up. Not even half the Senate voted to convict him. So we don't want that to, if something needs to happen, we want it to happen from both sides of the aisle, I believe.
And that's why we want to make sure that Mueller has a chance to do the investigation. We want to put all of the facts before the American people and before Congress so that we can show that we're going to respect the justice process, so that we can really provide the most pointed contrast to the way that the Trump administration has been conducting itself.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Katie, we want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if anybody wants to learn more about us, my website's katieporter.com.
Well, give people an opportunity. People have an opportunity to hear and see you here. A lot of people don't, especially people here. If you're living in Laguna Woods, a lot of people can't get out.
Well, we'll be here.
Really
we did a wonderful event a few months ago at Laguna Woods Towers. We'll hopefully be back doing that, and we'll be out knocking doors, talking to people, and most important, listening to people and hearing what's on their minds and what they want to see out of Washington in the years to come.
Right. Well, we've been speaking with Katie Porter, the Democratic candidate for Congress in the 45th District here in Orange County. If you live in Laguna Woods, you live in the 45th District. We also invited our current member of Congress, Mimi Walters, to join today. We sent her several invitations and she didn't respond to any of them. She ignored them. And that's one of the big problems we have with our current member of Congress. Mimi Walters is completely inaccessible and unresponsive to us, the people that live in the 45th District. Mimi Walters never meets with her constituents. She never issues a public statement. She never even takes a position on any issues. She doesn't really represent us in Congress. She represents her political party, and she represents the business and corporate interests that have donated millions of dollars to her over the years. You want to learn about Mimi Walters? The best thing to do is just try to deliver a letter or a petition to her district office in Irvine. While you're walking upstairs, Mimi Walters and her staff are literally locking the office doors. She would rather lock us out of her office than talk with us. It's a perfect picture for her time in office, sitting silently behind a locked door. But we need more than that, and we deserve more than that. And Katie Porter will give us a lot more than that, and Katie Porter is a lot better than that. Now, I know people are angry, they're sad. You can pick your own adjective about the ignorance, the incompetence, the vulgarity, which is the Trump administration. People thought Republicans controlling both houses of Congress would be some sort of bulwark against the worst instincts of the president, but it hasn't worked out like that. In our congressional district, no matter how big or obvious the lie the president says, have you ever heard Mimi Walters demanding the truth? She's not a bulwark, she's an enabler. If Donald Trump was an alcoholic, Mimi Walters would be at the package store every morning, making sure his vodka would last through the day. This coming election, it's not about ideology, it's not about political parties, it's not Republicans and Democrats. It's lies and chaos against people willing to stand up and speak the truth. You heard Katie Porter today, you saw Katie Porter today, you know she's willing to stand up and speak the truth. Mimi Walters isn't. In fact, she's not willing to stand up and say anything about anything. If you're a Republican or a conservative, you are not betraying any principles by doing what's right and voting for Katie Porter in this election. You're standing up for the principles and institutions of our country. They're under attack by our own government. Every day we get weaker, we get more isolated in the world due to the chaos in the administration and the total silence by Mimi Walters and the Republicans in Congress. We can't afford another 2 years like we've had the past 2 years. We need to replace Mimi Walters in Congress. We need to replace her silence. We need to replace her hypocrisy. We need to replace the chaos that she's brought to us. We need to replace her with Katie Porter. We can begin this process of reclaiming our government, basing it on things like common sense and dignity right here in the 45th district in this election. We can do that by sending Katie Porter to Congress. Look, Mimi Walters insists on closing her eyes whenever Donald Trump walks by, but our eyes are open, and we know the emperor has no clothes. But that doesn't mean somebody's riding down on a white horse to save us from the depravity of this administration. They're not. We have to do it. And our weapon is the vote. We can't afford 2 more years of this. We need to replace Mimi Walters in Congress. We need to replace her with Katie Porter. She'll actually ask us what we think and listen to what we say. And she'll do one other thing. She'll live up to her oath of office. She'll work to protect and defend this country and its Constitution. Mimi Walters isn't doing that. She's working to protect and defend an obviously incompetent, and now we know probably criminal president from the scrutiny of the American people. That's not why we sent her to Congress, but it's one of the reasons why we need to replace her with Katie Porter. So I want to thank everybody very much.
Yep.
We will be back. We'll have other candidates on in the coming months, so I hope you're watching. And don't forget to vote, and vote the entire ballot when you vote. Don't stop at those familiar names at the top. Go all the way down. Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Katie.
you so much.